Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. Today I have a tag to share using simple one shade watercolouring with sparkle. I'm starting off by taking some hot pressed watercolour paper, and I've cut that into two small pieces so that I can do some stamping. I've got the stamp wheel here, so I'm placing one of those pieces into the stamp wheel, holding it down with that sticky mat. I'm then taking the Wallpaper art stamp set. This is an oldie but a goodie. I absolutely love the design of these flowers. I do love the leaves as well, but I wanted to use the leaves from a different set today so that I can add some watercolouring to them. So I've placed that flower onto the watercolour paper, and now I'm taking the top flip plate of the stamp wheel, popping that in place to pick up that stamp. I can then flip that over and I can ink up the stamp using Obsidian Pigment Ink. This is a really lovely dark crisp ink that's perfect for watercolouring. So I'm just inking up that stamp really well. The centre of the flower is quite solid, and so I am going to have to stamp this multiple times just to make sure that I get a really nice dark impression. So just stamping that once, I can then flip the plate back over and ink that up again. And I am going to do this 3 times just to get that centre portion quite solid. So just stamping that down for the last time. And I really love the look of these flowers. And then taking the other piece of watercolour paper, popping that in place. And then I'm taking the leaf image from the Golden Days stamp set. I thought this one was quite nice, quite kind of like got quite a lot of open area for me to do some watercolouring on. So just taking that stamp there, and I do want to stamp this twice so that I've got 2 sets of leaves. So just making sure that I'm popping that stamp down towards the bottom of this panel so that I've got enough space to stamp it again on the other side. So I'm inking up the stamp with the Obsidian Pigment Ink and then stamping that down. And I could have got away with just stamping this once, but I want to make sure that the saturation of colour is going to be the same as what it is on the flower. So I'm just stamping that twice. I can flip over that watercolour paper and then I can stamp the leaves again on the other side so that I've got 2 sets. And again, I'm just going to stamp that twice. I then want to add some colour onto the images, and I'm using watercolour tubes for this. So I'm taking the dark cyan colour, opening up that tube and adding a little bit of that into a porcelain palette. And then I'm just going to do the same thing for the phthalo green. So I'm using the dark cyan for the flower and then the phthalo green for the leaves. And ordinarily when I do watercolouring, I do like to mix watercolours together to get the shade that I want. But I wanted to show you that you can just use the colours straight out of the tube, and you could just do one shade watercolouring and it's really quick and easy. So I've got a size 4 fine watercolour brush here and some water, and I'm just diluting that watercolour a little bit. I don't tend to do much loose watercolouring. I do always feel like I would like to, but I don't end up doing so, especially on stamped images, so I'm not adding too much water to those paints. I've then got my watercolour kind of water pot to my right hand side, and I've got a cloth to the left hand side. So anytime my hand goes to the right hand side, I'm dipping the paintbrush in water, and anytime I'm moving it to the left hand side, I am kind of wiping it off onto that cloth because I don't want too much water on the brush. So I've added a little bit of the colour towards the top of the petals, and then I have kind of washed off my brush, adding a little bit more water to it, and then I'm going in and blending that colour. And I do that 3 times to try and blend that colour to white. This is really quite pale at this point, but I I'm going to add another layer on top. Even though with watercolors you technically can make it lighter, it's still easier to go light to start with and then go darker. So just moving out that color there, as you can see, to white, and then picking up some more color and moving on to the next petal. Most times with watercolor you probably do want to kind of skip a petal in between if you're doing something like a flower, so that the wet kind of doesn't sort of bleed into each other. Because I'm not using too much water here, I didn't feel that I needed to, but that is definitely a good method to do, especially like with no line watercoloring or something like that. But for here I was quite happy if the colours blended together a little bit. It didn't matter because I'm just using the one shade of colour. So again, just going through these petals here, adding a little bit of the paint and then fading that up to white with the water. And like I said, I'm definitely more of kind of like a tight watercolorist when it comes to stamped images, but I would like to get a little bit looser if I can. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy watercoloring and what kind of sort of watercolor artist you are. So now I've completed the whole of the flower, I'm then going to go back in and add some more of the paint, and I'm just going to try and darken those areas, specifically where the petals kind of fall into the center of the flower. And then again, I'm just going to fade that out to white. I did get a couple of bristles from the brush there onto my painting, so I'm just lifting those off and then going back in and blending that out to white again. And this isn't completely dry at this point, but I did find that these watercolours moved quite nicely. I did get a little bit of kind of blending between the two, but again, like I said, I wasn't too concerned about that. I wasn't necessarily going for like a really smooth look, even though, like I say, I'm not necessarily a kind of loose watercolorist. I didn't really want it to, I wanted it to be quite sort of airy, I suppose, if that makes sense. So then I can do the same thing here for the leaves. So I'm using that phthalo green, adding some of that towards the kind of base of the leaf. And then I can wash off my brush and then bring that kind of clean water back onto the image and blend that out. Again, I'm then cleaning that brush again and then blending that out further. And then I'm just going to do the same thing then for the other leaves as well. And these paints are great because they're very transparent, so when you go over the lines of the stamp, it's not going to obscure them at all. So just blending that out. I do then sometimes need to go in with a little bit more watercolor, and then I'm going to go in like I did for the flower with a second layer on these leaves, just to really brighten those up. And I do think going in with a second layer really does make quite a big difference. I then want to add some sparkle onto the flower and leaves. So I'm taking some of the Iridescent Shimmer ink spray, spraying that into the palette, and then I can pick that up with the brush. And this brush is wet slightly. And I'm just going to dab that onto the flower and the leaves. I'm trying where best to avoid the stamped lines, but I did go over them a little bit, which is fine, but you are going to see that shimmer kind of over the lines. There are a few different ways that you could do this. You could spritz some of the ink spray into the actual watercolours themselves, and then when you did the watercolouring they would be completely shimmery, but I just wanted the shimmer to mainly be where that colour is. I don't really want it to kind of go all the way to the end of the petals or onto the leaves, so that's why I did it this way, but you could definitely do it in a few different ways. And although the shimmer kind of sparkle is quite subtle, you can see it quite nicely in real life, especially when it hits the light. It is a little bit more difficult to see on camera and in the photos though, sadly. But I'm just bringing that up here to the camera so that you can see, just adds that little kind of sparkle onto the images. I don't have the coordinating dies for the wallpaper art set, so I'm taking the fine blade scissors and I'm going to fussy cut this image out. I'm not great with fussy cutting, I will say. I didn't show all of this on camera because after I'd kind of done this part, I moved the image really close to my face so that I could see exactly what I was doing. But I wanted to show you that when I do fussy cutting, I do try and keep the blades of the scissors straight and try and move the image or the cardstock piece instead, and I find that I get a slightly better cut that way. So you can see here I'm trying to move the image itself rather than the scissors. So I just went around the outside edge of that, leaving a small white border, and thankfully I do have the coordinating dies for the Golden Days set, so I cut those run those through my die cutting machine, I should say, with those dies. I've then got a tag here that I've cut using the Terrific Tags die set, and I've cut that from the same hot pressed watercolor paper. I'm just placing my images on top so that I can see where I want them to be placed. I do want to add a little bit of watercolor into the background, so I'm using these as a placeholder, and then I'm taking that watercolor, the dark cyan, and I'm just kind of outlining here where I want the watercolor to be. I'm being a bit lazy here because I just want it sort of around the edges, and because you're not going to see the middle part because it's going to be covered up by the flower, I'm not really bothering to add the watercolor there. I could do, but what's the point if no one's going to see it? So I'm just using that brush there to kind of go around the outside edges. I do want to make sure that I bring it in further to the kind of middle of the tag, because I did leave that kind of white sort of gap between the flowers because I wanted to make sure that I didn't accidentally go over them. So I'm just fading that out again like I did with the petals, to kind of fade it out to white, and I just thought it just added a little bit of extra interest onto the tag. So just going in here, some of the areas I'm making a little bit darker, some of them are making a little bit lighter. Just making sure to really blend out those edges so it fades really nicely to the white of the tag. And then I can set that aside to dry. I've then cut another of the tags from the same watercolor paper. I don't really need it to be from watercolor paper here, but I'm definitely a person that likes all of my papers and cardstocks to match. So I still cut it from the watercolor paper, even though I didn't really need it to be. I'm adding some glue tape onto that and then sandwiching the two tags together. I'm then adding some more of the glue tape onto the back of the leaves, making sure not to add it right up to the edge of the leaves because I know that they are going to overlap the outside edge of that tag. So just using tweezers here just to help me get it in place. And then I can pop that down. And then I can add some instant dimension foam tape onto the back of the flower, just so that I can pop that up a little bit. And then I can pop that down in place, and that's going to cover up the center of that tag, and no one will ever know that there's no watercolor behind it. So just hovering it in place, and then once I'm happy, I can press that down. I've then added some black twine through the top of the tag and tied that in a bow. And then I've taken the Essential Sentiments hot foil plate and I have foiled that onto some black cardstock using white foil. And then I've cut that out using the coordinating Essential Sentiments die. I've then added some more foam tape onto the back of that, and then I can pop that in place. And that is the tag finished for today. I really love that kind of simple watercolouring, and you can see here just about that shimmer on the flower and the leaves. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.